You're in a conversation with someone who simply cannot grasp what you're saying. You lay out the facts, you trace the logic, you offer the context, and you watch it bounce off them like water on stone. No comprehension, no reflection, just a polite smile, a rehearsed rebuttal, or a sudden pivot to a completely unrelated grievance. You leave the room exhausted. You replay the exchange in your head, wondering what you could have said differently, where your argument fractured, why truth refuses to land. Stop blaming your delivery. You're not failing to communicate. You're bumping into the architecture of human consciousness. For your entire life, you've been sold a comforting myth that ignorance is just a lack of information, and that everyone can be reached with enough patience, data, or emotional intelligence. You've been taught that stupidity is a temporary condition, easily corrected by education. But what if it isn't? What if what you call stupidity isn't a flaw, but a feature? What if the human mind was never designed to seek truth, but to serve survival? What if the exhaustion you feel isn't a sign of your poor communication, but proof of your misplaced expectations? Today, we strip away the comforting lies. We step into Arthur Schopenhauer's uncompromising vision of human intellect, and we will show you why shallow minds aren't an accident of modern culture. They are the inevitable output of a biological machine built for desire, not understanding. By the end of this essay, you will stop wasting your energy. You will stop taking it personally, and you will finally understand why accepting this reality doesn't crush you, it frees you. Chapter 1. The Will's Puppet. Let's begin by dismantling the illusion that your brain exists to understand the world. It doesn't. It exists to keep your body alive, fed, safe, and socially positioned. Schopenhauer saw this with terrifying clarity. He observed, the intellect is a secondary and subordinate phenomenon, existing only for the service of the will. The will, in his framework, is the blind, driving force behind everything you do. Hunger, ambition, fear, lust, social validation. Your consciousness isn't the captain of this ship. It's the navigator hired to find the quickest route to the will's desires. And that changes everything. Think about the last time you argued with someone who refused to see obvious reality. You presented evidence. They countered with emotion. You offered nuance. They retreated into identity. You didn't lose because your logic was weak. You lost because their intellect wasn't hunting for truth. It was defending comfort. Modern psychology calls this motivated reasoning. Your brain doesn't process information neutrally. It filters it through a single, ruthless question. Does this protect or threaten what I already want? Schopenhauer explained it long before neuroscience mapped the amygdala. When you try to reason with a will-driven mind, you're not speaking to a rational processor. You're speaking to a survival mechanism wearing human clothes. Consider 3 simple realities. Your intellect evolved to justify, not to discover. Your beliefs are rarely chosen. They are inherited, adopted, or weaponized. Truth only wins when it aligns with desire. When you understand this, the frustration evaporates. You aren't dealing with stubborn people. You're dealing with biological imperative. The will doesn't care about accuracy. It cares about momentum. And every conversation you force, every article you share, every debate you initiate is just another log thrown onto a fire that was never meant to illuminate.
You've noticed it everywhere. The loudest voice in the room usually belongs to the person who understands it the least. The most absolute opinions are held by those who have examined them the least thoroughly. You sit in meetings, you scroll through comments, you watch public discourse fracture, and you wonder, why do the least competent people feel the most certain? because confidence is not a measure of knowledge, it's a symptom of cognitive blindness. Schopenhauer saw this centuries ago. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. When your mental horizon is narrow, the edges of your ignorance are invisible. You don't know what you don't know, and in that vacuum, certainty rushes in like air into an empty room. Modern psychology named it the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where low ability generates high confidence, precisely because the skills required to perform well are the same skills required to recognize poor performance. Think about the last time you felt truly competent. Did you feel it immediately? No. True competence breeds caution, it breeds doubt, it breeds the quiet realization of how much lies beyond your grasp. But ignorance? Ignorance feels like power. It doesn't require calibration, it doesn't demand revision, it just declares, I already know. You've tried to pierce it with facts, you've tried to puncture it with experience. It doesn't work, because certainty isn't built on evidence, it's built on psychological economy. Thinking deeply is metabolically expensive. Holding complexity requires energy most brains refuse to spend. So they outsource it. They adopt slogans. They mimic the opinions of their tribe. They wear confidence like armor. Ask yourself, why do you expect depth from minds that were never trained to swim? Why do you demand nuance from people who have never been rewarded for patience? Why do you mistake volume for authority and repetition for truth? The answer is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Most people aren't choosing ignorance, they're defaulting to it. The brain conserves energy, the will demands certainty, and when the two align, you get the spectacle of modern discourse, loud, absolute, and entirely hollow. You don't need to fight it, you just need to recognize it. Once you see the machinery, the noise stops sounding like argument. It starts sounding like instinct.
You've been told what to do your whole life. Share the right podcast, lead with empathy, meet them where they are, keep trying, never give up. It's noble advice. It's also biologically bankrupt. The mainstream assumes intellect is a dial you can turn. It isn't. It's a ceiling, and for most people, that ceiling sits right at the level of social convenience. You've experienced it. You present a complex idea. They reduce it to a moral binary. You explain systemic causes. They blame individual failure. You invite reflection. They demand reassurance. You think you're failing to persuade them. In reality, you're asking a flashlight to function as a lighthouse. Schopenhauer was blunt. The majority of men are intellectually incapable of rising above the immediate and the practical. He didn't say this out of cruelty. He said it out of observation. When survival, status, and comfort are the primary drivers, abstraction becomes a luxury the mind simply cannot afford. You can't expect a brain wired for threat detection to suddenly enjoy metaphysical contemplation. You can't expect a nervous system trained for tribal loyalty to suddenly prioritize universal truth. Modern psychology confirms this. The backfire effect shows that challenging someone's core beliefs often strengthens their original position. Cognitive load theory demonstrates that working memory collapses under complexity without training. Ego depletion proves that reasoning is a finite resource, easily exhausted by emotional friction. The data doesn't contradict Schopenhauer, it echoes him. Why do you keep pouring truth into vessels that were never shaped to hold it? Why do you mistake resistance for malice when it's actually metabolism? Why do you exhaust yourself trying to elevate minds that only ask you to conform? The mainstream tells you to keep arguing. The intelligent few know when to walk away. You weren't built to convert the world. You were built to preserve your own clarity.
Every time you try to reason with a will-driven certainty, you aren't elevating them, you're draining yourself. You're trading your peace for a fantasy of collective awakening that will never materialize. Truth doesn't win debates. It waits for minds that are already hungry for it. And those minds are rare. Not because they're chosen, because they're forged through friction, silence, and the deliberate refusal to accept the easy answer. Let's map the mechanism. You need to see the structure clearly, because once you understand how consciousness fails itself, you'll stop expecting it to behave like it shouldn't. First, biological imperative. Your prefrontal cortex is outnumbered. It shares space with older, faster systems that prioritize survival over truth. The limbic system doesn't ask, "Is this accurate?" It asks, "Does this protect me?" You're not fighting ignorance, you're fighting millions of years of evolutionary design. The intellect is a recent upgrade running on ancient hardware, and it constantly gets overridden. Second, social mimicry. Schopenhauer wrote, "We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people." Belonging isn't a psychological preference, it's a neurological mandate. Ostracism triggers the same brain regions as physical pain, so the mind trades originality for inclusion. You don't adopt shallow opinions because you love them. You adopt them because they're the toll for remaining inside the circle. Depth isolates. Shallow thought connects. The brain chooses connection every time. Third, cognitive economy. Thinking deeply requires metabolic sacrifice. The brain consumes 20% of your energy while representing 2% of your weight. Complex reasoning burns glucose. It demands sleep, stillness, and recovery. Most environments don't reward that. They reward speed. They reward certainty. They reward the quick reply, not the careful reflection. So the mind defaults to heuristics. It shortcuts, it mimics, it repeats, not out of malice, out of efficiency. You're not surrounded by fools. You're surrounded by organisms running optimized survival scripts, and you've been blaming them for succeeding at a game you're trying to change the rules to. Think of the intellect as a lantern carried through a dark cave. Most keep the beam pointed at the ground, watching for tripping hazards, avoiding shadows, stepping over roots. That's the will's demand. Navigate safely, keep moving, don't look up, don't wonder what's at the edges, just reach the next meal, the next validation, the next comfort. You, however, have turned the beam upward. You've seen the stalactites, you've noticed the patterns, and now you're frustrated that others don't see them too. But frustration is a miscalculation. You're judging a flashlight for not being a telescope. Stop demanding depth from a system engineered for survival. Recognize the architecture, map the limitations, conserve your energy, and redirect your attention to the few minds that actually hold the beam upward.
So, how do you navigate a world that operates on shallow scripts? You don't fight it, you outmaneuver it. Mainstream advice tells you to engage, educate, and elevate. It tells you to argue longer, explain slower, empathize harder, and it leaves you exhausted, cynical, and quietly resentful. That's not wisdom. That's self-sabotage dressed as virtue. The intelligent few operate differently. They don't try to change the current. They learn to sail above it. First, withdraw from unnecessary engagement. You cannot out-argue biology. You cannot logic your way past a nervous system trained for tribal defense. Every debate you enter without mutual intellectual humility is a tax on your own clarity. Stop paying it. Guard your attention like capital. It is your only non-renewable resource. Second, cultivate strategic silence. Schopenhauer understood that depth thrives in restraint. A man's mind is the measure of his life,
not his age or his years. You don't prove your intelligence by speaking more. You prove it by knowing when not to. Silence isn't surrender, it's filtration. It lets the noise exhaust itself while you remain anchored in what actually matters. Third, curate your environment aggressively. You cannot think deeply in shallow soil. If every interaction demands reduction, every platform rewards outrage, every relationship penalizes nuance, you don't adapt to it. You distance yourself. Build a perimeter. Seek the rare minds that value inquiry over victory. Read what was written before the algorithm existed. Study those who wrestled with truth, not trends. What most people do, they argue with strangers. They share articles expecting gratitude. They exhaust their peace trying to convince the uninterested. They call it advocacy. It's actually attachment. What you must do, observe without absorbing, listen without agreeing, engage only when reciprocity is guaranteed. Protect your inner space like a sanctuary, not a battleground. You're not responsible for the intellectual poverty of your era. You're responsible for refusing to let it colonize your mind. Stop trying to fix what isn't broken in them. Fix what is bleeding in you. Your expectation that the world should match your depth. It won't. And that's not a tragedy. It's a boundary.
Let's cut through the final illusion, that recognizing this truth makes you cynical. It doesn't. It makes you clear. You've spent years believing that frustration is a sign you care. It's not. Frustration is a sign you're misaligned. You've been trying to extract depth from a reality that operates on survival, comfort, and mimicry. That's like trying to pull fresh water from salt. You can try. You will fail. You will blame the ocean. Or you will accept its nature and build a desalination plant of your own. Schopenhauer's path isn't despair, it's resignation in the classical sense. The foundation of all wisdom is resignation. Not surrender to darkness, acceptance of reality. You stop demanding the world be what it isn't. You stop measuring your worth against the comprehension of those who cannot comprehend. You lower your expectations not out of defeat, but out of precision. Here's the triad that liberates you. Accept that most minds are structurally limited. Accept that your peace is not negotiable. Accept that depth is a solitary cultivation. This isn't nihilism. Nihilism says nothing matters, so why try? This says most things don't matter, so only try at what does. Nihilism collapses inward. This focuses outward with surgical precision. Nihilism breeds apathy. This breeds discipline. You don't withdraw from the world. You withdraw from the illusion that the world will meet you halfway. You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You stop performing intelligence for audiences that only recognize noise. You conserve your energy. You read deeply. You think slowly. You surround yourself with the rare minds that ask questions instead of reciting answers. You build an internal life so rich that external validation becomes irrelevant. And when the loud certainty of the shallow returns, and it will, you won't tense, you won't argue, you won't internalize it. You'll recognize it for what it is: biology doing its job, will doing its bidding, a mind doing exactly what it was designed to do. You don't need to fix them. You just need to stop letting them fracture you.
The final truth. Listen closely, because this is the line that separates the exhausted from the free. You were never meant to convince them. You were never meant to elevate the unready. You were never meant to measure your clarity against their certainty. The world runs on the will. The will runs on desire, desire runs on repetition, and repetition breeds certainty, not comprehension. You've been trying to interrupt a machine that doesn't want to be interrupted. You've been speaking truth to minds that only hear threat. You've been offering light to eyes that only recognize comfort. Stop. Accept it. Most people are intellectually limited. Accept it. Most people cannot hold complexity. Accept it. Most people will never meet you where you are. Not because they're evil, because they're engineered. This isn't a condemnation, it's an emancipation. The moment you stop expecting depth from shallow soil, you stop drowning in it. The moment you stop arguing with biology, you conserve your energy. The moment you stop treating ignorance as a choice, you free yourself from resentment. You are not responsible for the intellectual poverty of your age. You are responsible for refusing to inherit it. You are not obligated to fix what isn't yours to fix. You are obligated to protect what actually belongs to you, your attention, your peace, your capacity to see clearly. Lower your expectations, not because you've given up, because you've finally seen clearly. Conserve your energy, not out of bitterness, out of strategy. Cultivate your mind, not for applause, for survival in a world that punishes depth with silence. Accept the architecture, respect the limits, guard your clarity, and walk forward unburdened by the illusion that you must convince the world to wake up.
If this resonated, you're already ahead of the curve. Recognition is the first step. Integration is the practice. Write in the comments, "It made sense to me," not to prove anything, just to anchor it, to mark the moment you stopped fighting reality and started navigating it. Subscribe to Echo of Thought if you want more unvarnished philosophy for modern minds. We don't comfort you, we clarify you, and sometimes clarity is the only comfort you actually need. Walk lightly, think deeply, expect little from the crowd. Build everything within yourself. You're free now.